Welcome everyone to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV from Lee Enterprises. I'm Terry Lipshetz, a senior producer at Lee and co-host of the program, shall I say the inventor of this program, Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and a longtime entertainment reporter. You're the inventor. You are truly an inventor of this podcast.
Yeah, right. And I don't want any credit for it, okay? It's not on my head. But it's funny how people have passion projects. Do you have a passion project? Is there anything in your mind that you say, this is something I want to be known for?
I haven't quite gotten there yet. I have things that I'm passionate about in my life, but I don't have a project per se that I'm sharing with the world.
Okay. I have a couple of things in my life, okay? One is I have a movie idea in my mind that I think is going to be perfect. But until I retire, I will not write that script because names are used. But the other thing, there was a time when I was in like my maybe 40s that I thought I was losing my hearing. I thought it's gone. And I was tested and they said, yeah, you could lose your hearing. And I thought as a journalist, I don't want to go through life without something that I could point to that would represent me, that would represent what I could do as a journalist. And it just all came out about at a basketball game. I was sitting next to a friend at a basketball game, and she said, these aren't the same. High school just isn't the same anymore. I go to the games and the kids aren't here cheering. The band doesn't support the teams. It's not like we remember when we were kids. And I thought, well, let's just see what that was all about. And so I decided to do a look back at the time. It was the class of 1977. And I decided to talk to the people who were in the class of 1977. And what was high school like back then? Was it really better? Was this something that we should have embraced and used as an example? And so I thought, well, this will be easy because I just go to the school and I'll ask them for those permanent records that they all seem to have. I went to the high school and the high school said, we don't have anything like that. I said, you're kidding. My whole life has been built on your permanent record. And I wanted to make sure that my permanent record was good. She said, oh no, we throw those out after the kids are gone. We're good. And I said, well, do you have the graduation list? No, we don't have that either. I said, you don't have the graduation list? You got to be kidding me. She said, there might be a yearbook in the library. Go to the library. If you find the yearbook there, you can take it out for a while and get some names out of that. So I went to the library and the yearbook had been cut out of. I kid you not. People cut pictures out of it. So what I learned from this was there is no permanent record of your high school life. But I got enough names. It was a class of about 300 or 400. And I diligently put together this master list of all of these kids. And one led to another, to another, to another, to another. And I ended up with, I think it was more than 160 of the class of 1977 out of 300 or 400. And what I would do at night, because I thought I was losing my hearing, is I would sit with a headset on and I would call members of the class of 1977 and ask them about what was school like? What do you remember? Was it better then? And I built this whole story about what was it really like and how does it compare to now? Because most of them would have been parents of kids in high school at the same time. And it was a fascinating thing. I was able to relive all of their high school years and find out how it affected people. And there were people who said things like, every time I drive by the school, even now, I feel this deep pit in my stomach. I hated that place. I didn't like the people there. As I learned from all of this research, people that I knew I needed to hit, the valedictorian would easily be somebody. The student body president was somebody. The star basketball player, star football player, star baseball player, star wrestler, the homecoming king and queen. I mean, I had all those ones who are like landmarks in a high school class. And I got to all of them. And then I had a group of them who were really close friends get together, and we just talked about high school. And I'll tell you, it was a fascinating thing because I knew these people as old people, and they were talking about their youth. And I learned that some people do not move on beyond high school. High school is the be-all, the end-all. It is the high point of their life. It was, I think, a 12-part series that I wrote. Whatever happened to the class of 1977. And even to this day, I have people who will come to me and say, are you going to do another class? No, I'm not. The good news is that my hearing came back. So I didn't feel like I needed to do anything anymore, but I think it represented me at my best. And I look back on it now, and this has been quite a few years since, because I think we hit a milestone, and they said you should go back and revisit them. And I never did. But I was made an official member of the class of 1977, and I have been invited to class reunions. So there's my chance of being able to do that. But it was a fascinating thing. Well, in the movie business, there are those passion projects. There are things that people live to do, and they don't always get the funding for it. You know, you might try something on a lower scale or a smaller scale, and then maybe somebody will say, let's do it. Let's make the film out of this. And that's what happened with a film that's coming out this week called The Inventor. It was a passion project of writer-director Jim Capobianco, who had done a short subject about Leonardo da Vinci called Leonardo in 2009, I believe it was. And he wanted to expand this into something much bigger, make it a much bigger film than it ever was. And so he got the funding, got the people, got everything behind it, and created this animated film that's a hybrid. It's part stop motion animation, and it's part 2D or drawn animation. And it's him at his best, at least as he sees it. And it's a way for him to do those stories. And he says, you know, he grew up in the Disney, what do you call it? The factory, Disney factory.
Sure.
He wrote Ratatouille, in case you need to have a point of reference. And they always said, you know, do your passion projects, do the things that you most care about, and you'll never go wrong because you're doing something that you have an interest in. And his interest was in Leonardo da Vinci. He couldn't believe that this guy did all these things, all of this kind of stuff. And yet, in the later years of his life, what was it that drove him? What was the thing that kept him going? And so that's kind of the thrust of The Inventor, is those later years when he was in France and what he did with those things. And I mean, my God, go down the list of the stuff that Leonardo did. Unbelievable. But then he also has to bring in others to share this kind of passion, if you will, and get those people excited about it. And so that's what he did. He had to try and build this thing like he is a Leonardo of an animated feature.
This film isn't attached with Disney or one of the other big studios, right?
No. It's a very much independent film.
Which is cool to see, especially with an animated film, because animated films aren't necessarily cheap, and it takes a little bit of work to get them done.
Well, and the idea that you're doing stop motion and drawn animation, when do you do which? And I think I did an interview with him. We'll hopefully have parts of it here that you can listen to. But he said that he used the stop motion, which are like, if you remember Nightmare Before Christmas, Tim Burton loves to do this. They're like little dolls, if you will. All of the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, any of those kinds of films were done stop motion, and you'd move them very slightly. And then then shoot the frame, and then you keep going. And eventually it looks like the character is moving around. But he did reality, or the real part of it, in stop motion. And then the flights of fantasy that he might have as the drawn stuff. So you could see drawings come to life and what they would mean for him. You know, he worked on a flying machine, and you could see the flying machine come to life. So it's a fascinating thing, but then he also had to draw others in. And one of the ones he drew in was Alex Mandel, who is a composer who worked with him at Disney on a number of things. But he had a sharper learning curve because he did not know the whole backstory of Leonardo. let's be honest. Do we all study Leonardo? Do you want to see a cartoon about Leonardo? You probably don't, you know? And so he had to take a lot of the information that he was given by Jim and then work from that. The interesting thing is he also realized that he could take a shift and jump out of this, and he wouldn't have to have period music. It wouldn't have to sound like it was from Leonardo's time. He could be different with all of this. Well, one of the things he did is he recorded a kind of a test song to see how well this would work when they were pitching it. And he needed a singer. And so he said to his daughter, who was a singer, 10 years old, record this for me. Her name is Sequoia Mandel. And Sequoia, was in. She was in for the money. She thought this was good. This was a good idea. So when they kept kind of adding food, we had the pandemic, we had all these things in there. She recorded another version at 12. She recorded songs at 15. She's throughout this whole thing. And it helped him also understand the people that they were hiring for the parts. She knew more about the actors who were being hired than Dad did. And it helped him realize what kind of their range was for the music. So it's a fascinating kind of story. And I think this is not a movie that kids might just embrace. This is not the latest Frozen. You know what I mean? It tells another story. It is something that if you're an animation fan and you're older, it's something you will appreciate because you see how these people that we now view as just untouchable geniuses that have no relationship to us, how the thought process went for them and what they had to do to put it together. Stephen Sondheim wrote a song for Sunday in the Park with George called Putting It Together. And that's exactly what it is. It's like, what are the little elements that create genius? And that's what you get out of this film.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting film. And I agree. It seems like the type of film that it's not necessarily you're going to gather up your 5-year-olds and shuffle off to the theater, but maybe a more mature age of children, teenagers, and people that can appreciate different types of animation. And I love animation. I've always been drawn to things like the Tim Burton stop motion. And even as a teenager, I was really fascinated by Gumby, which, that was a stop motion television program from, I guess, the 1960s probably.
Hokey, claymation.
Yeah, exactly. So that's always been fun. So I think this is the type of film that would be really interesting to check out and see. I'm trying to think, what kind of music would be of the time of Leonardo DiCaprio? Probably a lot of harpsichords, maybe.
See, you're making...
Hello. Well, the music of Leonardo DiCaprio would be very familiar to all
Taylor
of us.
Swift. I think she's in there.
Taylor.
But, with this...
With Da Vinci, yeah.
With Da Vinci, you would think, well, there's probably some lutes and lyres and all that kind of stuff. And,
right.
Is that what it is? I don't know. But if you can be a little more modern with some of it, it might be a little way of telegraphing what he is thinking or how he is thinking. How do you stay ahead of the curve and not below the curve? Because most of us are below the curve,
So what do we want to do first? Do we want to go to the interview with Jim Capobianco?
If you'd like, that'd be a great one. And you'll hear him talk about, his creative time and what he learned from all of this. He'll explain the process a little better than I could. But if you will, grab a snippet from that, and I think that should give you a sense of the film.
Why sit in traffic when you can ride transit? With improved service on the Metro and fare-free rides on Dash, traveling in and around the capital region has never been easier. Did you know that you can map your commute around the DMV using any mode of public transit? Yellow Line service is back on track in Alexandria with a new stop at the Potomac Yard VT Metro Rail Station. Getting around Northern Virginia has never been easier. Leave the car keys and stress at home and hop on a train, bus, or bike. Plan your trip at novarides.org.
How do you get obsessed with Leonardo DiCaprio? No,
I'm totally obsessed with
Leonardo da Vinci. What is the deal?
I think like a lot of artists, you get to know about Leonardo da Vinci in some form. But then I made this short film. I started researching him for that. And then I just started to see him more as a human being than just a genius. And that kind of aspect of him, I wanted to sort of explore further in the feature. So, that's what kind of drew me to him more, and obviously he's such an interesting character or person, with all his interests and everything. So that just, to bring him down to kind of a more human level was really what's always driven me about him.
But then don't people say, wait a minute here, people may not want to go to see something like this,
Well, I don't know. I guess maybe the people we were trying to get money from and to raise funds for thought that way, but I can't. I just want, I'm just going to try to tell the story I kind of want to tell. So I didn't worry about that too much. I mean, it was always in the back of my mind, would people really want to see this, or kids and stuff? So, but as a film, as I developed it, that I wanted to see, and that's how we always develop stuff at Pixar and Disney. So it was always like, what's the film that I, as a kid inside of me and an adult, would want to see in animation? So that's
did it turn out the way you wanted it to be? Did it become the vision that you had way back when?
Or beyond my vision. It's just, I think the team we brought together just brought so much magic to the film, and I couldn't have asked for a better group of artists to work with. And yeah, I don't think I ever envisioned what we created. It's just amazing.
So how do you decide what's going to be stop motion animation and what's going to be drawn animation? I mean, to me, that was very fascinating to see how it, it would separate, and then it would be this, it'd be that. How do you make those decisions?
Well, as I developed it, I started to see the stop motion as the kind of the real world of the world, and then the drawn animation as sort of Leonardo's flights of fancy, or it was more free, because the two techniques, stop motion you are rigid in the sense that you can only animate what you've planned, because you have to build an armature and it can only do certain movements, and it can walk and move its arms. If it's going to do some sort of fantastic movement that animation can do, you'd have to plan for that, and they aren't usually built that way. You have gravity, you have a lot of things you have to worry about. But with 2D drawn animation, whatever you can draw, you can pretty much depict. So it is a much more fluid form of animation. It's freer. It has this sort of sense of lightness to it. So to me, that was like Leonardo. You go into Leonardo's brain, you go into his thoughts. That would be 2D animation. When we're in the real world, it would be stop motion animation.
Okay, well, is it easier to do one or the other?
People think stop motion is much harder, but I think it's just where you have to put the planning for it, or where the difficulties lie. Like stop motion, you build a puppet. A lot of the work is in the building of everything and assembling it, and like working out the costumes, working out how the armatures will be built. And then once you have the puppets and you animate it, that's what you have. I mean, it's like a live action shoot. You shoot it and you have that footage, right? It's done. With 2D drawn animation, you have the difficulty. There's planning and designing it, but once you animate it, there's other follow-on tasks that have to be done. It has to be colored, maybe cleaned up, because the animators generally draw rough, and then there's another artist that cleans it up and stuff. But also you have to deal with each animator might draw the character slightly differently, and you need to kind of rein that in and adjust. They're always a little off. I mean, I think if you really go through the film and really analyze it, you'll see the Leonardo's and the 2D change shot sizes.
Oh, wow. Now don't get that mean about it.
Good.
Right?
Like stop motion, you build this puppet, that's it. You cannot vary it. Each artist that touches it's going to be the same. So they have they're both different. It's animation. Animation is the nuttiest, craziest.
Anything can happen, right? Right? Anything can happen with animation.
That's right. That's true.
Squash and squish. Come on. When you were using his artwork, what did you see that he could have been an animator at some point? I mean,
I always thought that, actually. You see how he studied motion. He did a lot of studies about how people move or animals move, and you see he does there's these drawings he did of construction workers, and you see them in different poses of working, and they look like animators, sketches that we would do when we study anatomy, and we look at people walking around the street, and we fill our sketchbooks with these actions. And obviously he studied anatomy, so he's learning about how the body moves. And so, yeah, I've always thought if animation was a thing back then, he might have tried animation. I don't think it would be the only thing he'd do, because the guy was always changing his ideas.
Well, to me, that's so remarkable that there are all these things he had his hand in. And could you imagine yourself? I mean, sure, yeah, you have a lot of interests in a lot of different things, but he was like at the top of his game with so many of those things.
Yeah, no, I don't see myself that way.
So where do you find the human element to Leonardo?
Well, I find it in that he had to have a patron. He had to have somebody who paid him money, but he had these other dreams he wanted to do, which I think a lot of us do. You have to make a living, but you also want to do other things that you find more enjoyable or explore, and then also he had a lot of fear of like how he would be accepted in his world. And I think that's true of a lot of people today. He wanted recognition for what he did and what he could do, and that he didn't always receive that. So I think there's a lot of humanity, and then ultimately the story is about legacy and what you leave behind. And I think that, to me, speaks to a lot of what I would imagine, I hope people think about, how we touch other people and affect their lives and stuff. So to me, those are the human elements I really wanted to touch on, and also the curiosity. I mean, the curiosity had and all these other things.
So how do we start casting the voices? I mean, you had the voices in your mind, you say this would be perfect for so-and-so, or is it just, I mean, that to me, it's an international cast.
Yeah.
And
it really came about, I developed the character first and the story, and I was still developing the story, but then I was like, okay, who could voice Leonardo? And then, I mean, the only person I could really think of was Stephen Fry, just because he's such a polymath himself. And
sure,
he I didn't want the like booming voice of a Gandalf. I really wanted like this lighter voice with wit and intelligence. And to me, Stephen was that perfect casting. And even when recording him, he would correct my use of words and then give me the etymology of that word. Like,
thank you.
So much fun. So, and then Marguerite, seeing Daisy Ridley in the the Star Wars films, not Disney too, but she just had a power in her voice, and also a kind of vulnerability in there as well. And I thought that was perfect for Marguerite. I didn't know I would ever be able to cast her, but I was like, okay, that's the character in some ways, that voice inside Marguerite. And then, you go, okay, who do you want? The producer's like, okay, who should we cast for Marguerite? And I'm like, well, I just thought Daisy Ridley would be great. And we're like, well, let's see if we can get Daisy Ridley. And then you also make a list. You're like, oh, so. But she was at the top. I really wanted Daisy. And then, she accepted to do it too. And Marion Cotillard was like, suggested actually by the French studio. We were still looking for Louise's voice. And they said, we might be able to get Marion Cotillard. And you're like, what?
Okay, I guess we could use her.
Yeah, maybe. The one interesting thing with her is, we have these songs in the film, and that was the last song we made that she sings, because we didn't have one for her. And then I told Alex, the composer, I said, Alex, we have Marion Cotillard in the film. She's the one person everyone knows can sing, and we don't have a song for her. So we reworked the story a little bit to put in the En Garde song, En Garde Préalé, and it just was like the perfect thing, because it connected to the dueling in the earlier part of the film, and like that. And so that's how the film would work and evolve. It's like, well, we need this here, and it's like, oh, we have to connect it there. And
thanks, Bruce, for that interview. Real fascinating stuff. And now you do have one other interview, and that would be Alex Mandel.
And you'll hear him talk too about working with his daughter, and you'll hear about those who can't sing because, they don't always put singers in these animated films. In fact, many of the Disney films, they would have a singing voice and then they would also have a speaking voice. So Aladdin, spoiler alert, the singing voice of Aladdin is not the talking voice of Aladdin. And that's not uncommon. It's often the practice. But you'll hear him talk about some of the actors who are in the film and their abilities with singing. Fill me in. Where do you start with something like this? This seems like, man, how do I pay tribute to somebody like Leonardo? And then where do I begin with the sound of it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jim Capobianco, the writer and director, has been studying Leonardo for years. He had done a film about Leonardo da Vinci back in, I think, 2009. And so I was trying to catch up, but I really relied on Jim to say, this is the part of Leonardo da Vinci he was interested in, which is his last years, where he left Italy as an older man, went to France and never came back. And so this is him really dealing with the end of his life and the meaning of life and his mortality and what he can leave behind for future generations, which he did. And so, yeah, that was the storyline. And so then the question is, well, how do we tell that story?
But do you start researching music of the times and saying it's got to sound authentic to that period? Or do you say, well, now here's my chance to be an inventor and I can go off the tracks?
Leonardo da Vinci was ahead of his time, right? He was designing flying machines 500 years or 400 years before the Wright brothers created an airplane. So that gave us some leeway because I could have music that sounded more of the time for, say, the king's court. But then from Leonardo, it was ahead of its time, and so the music becomes a kind of metaphor for the mindset of that character. So Leonardo and Marguerite, some of their music sounds like it's 150 years ahead of its time. Some of it sounds like it's modern. Whenever their ideas jump forward to our way of thinking, the music becomes more modern to reflect their thinking.
Okay, so then when you're dealing with the voices, and maybe a voice isn't that good at singing, and I'm not trying to name names, nobody's being called out here, but do you write for them or do you write the songs and then you say, okay, well, I guess you can talk through this one?
Yeah, there's an interesting story there. Stephen Fry, who's a brilliant writer.
Not that I'm naming names, okay?
Oh, no, and he would be the first to agree. He said, I'm really not comfortable singing, but Jim's idea was to have him speaking. But even so, there's, I don't know if you've seen the film, there's a scene where Leonardo arrives in France and he builds his workshop. The walls come up, and as he names things, they magically appear in stop motion. And that was a very fast, almost like rap that Stephen Fry had.
Right.
And it just took a while. He was very worried, but he did a great job. It turned out great. Daisy Ridley, my daughter said, Dad, here she is singing with Barbra Streisand. And I listened to her voice and I thought, okay, I think I get a feel for her range. She's got a great voice. I'll write the song to suit her voice. And same with Marion Cotillard, beautiful voice. She's recorded a lot. So I had a pretty good idea of what her range was, and I could keep that in mind as I composed the song for her.
So then how long do you have to write these songs? Because is it like 9 songs you've got or something?
It's 9 songs. Yeah, it's funny because at the end there, I wrote a bunch pretty fast. The reason was, I think Jim saw, these songs are helping to tell this story. So maybe Daisy needs a song. Maybe Marguerite needs a song. I pitched the idea. I said, we got to get Marion Cotillard to sing a song. She's a great singer. And also, I want to learn more about the Queen. Like, what did she want? And because she's a secondary character, you don't have that much time. So the song really summarizes a lot about her in a very quick way. That song was written quite quickly. And the fastest song was when Stephen he really said, I cannot sing at all. So there's a scene where he's talking to Mona Lisa, and we had 45 minutes to rewrite the song. And I suggested, Jim, what if Mona Lisa sings the chorus back to him? So he laments his situation. I'm finished. And Mona Lisa sings to him, yeah, you are. We're out of time. You're done. So sometimes you've got years and sometimes you've got 45 minutes.
Okay, there's a credit is it Sequoia? Is that a relative?
Sequoia is my daughter.
Okay, but then it's just from 10 to 15 or something. What is the deal with that?
So we've been working on this movie for a long time. When Jim asked for that first song, I had my 10-year-old daughter, Sequoia, sing it. And then it was cute. She had a very cute voice and it's just adorable. We actually had her re-sing it when she was 12. That's the version that's in the movie. But then Jim said, oh, I want the girls, all 4 girls, to be singing 4-part harmony. So I recorded her when she was 15 too. So we have my daughter Sequoia singing different songs.
And nice.
Yeah. And which is, again, really fits the theme of the movie, which is about family and it's about, legacy and sharing ideas with each other through the generations. So it worked really nicely.
So what does she think about this?
I think she's into it. I think, she's an aspiring actress, so she wants to be judged on her own merits, which I appreciate. But as far as I'm concerned, she did me a huge favor. And, she sang a duet with Daisy Ridley. So that's pretty cool. I think
Does she get all these like checks then for each age? I'd be holding out for that. Can I be her agent? It'd be a cool thing.
Thankfully not. No, we basically said we're going to put aside a fund for her. There's a certain amount of money that will be set aside for her. And we've handled that within the family.
Why did you stick with this so long? What was it? What was the pull for you?
Well, I really believe in Jim Capobianco's vision. I think he's a true artist. I think that this is, it's a work of art. I mean, and Jim, his passion is contagious. And also I got to have a lot of creative input, and so Jim would hear me out. He didn't always take my suggestions, but sometimes he did. And so I felt like I was very much a part of the movie and I wanted to see it succeed. So, some projects you do, to pay the rent and some you do for passion. And this is a passion project.
You must tell your daughter, I want to be your agent, because I think we've got a good partnership going on here. I think it'd be great. And I would make sure we got more than one check.
I'll let her know. I'll do the list. People keep asking me this but she will be, she's happy. She got a very good compensation package, but thank you.
Bruce, thanks for that other interview. And then just to kind of fill folks in on this film as well, it does have some heavyweights of sorts. And this isn't just like it's a smaller, little bit more independent film, but we've got Daisy Ridley from the Star Wars reboot. Right. She's in it. Matt Berry is in it. Stephen Fry is Leonardo da Vinci. I was going to say DiCaprio.
You know how easy that is? It
is.
Like I can.
It's so easy. But yeah, so there's
Marion, Cotillard.
Yeah. So some pretty well-known actors in this. So it should be an interesting one to check out.
When you put it out there that this is a passion project, people come because they know you're not going to just blow it off and it's going to be a 2-second kind of thing. It's going to be something that really gets the attention and the care and the feeding of it that it needs. And, when it's over, what's next? What do you have that comes after that?
Yeah. And what's fun about this episode, Bruce, is our concerns were a little bit alleviated because we know you can't get actors right now to talk because they're prohibited, right? During the strike, they can't talk to promote their stuff, but you're able to get the composer of the film and the director. So, hey, we're still bringing them in.
Dare to dream we could get a hairdresser.
That's right.
It could.
You never know.
It could happen.
It could happen. Costume designer.
Yes. We'll have all of those big ones, but
exactly.
It gives you a sense of what the other parts of the industry are, and that it isn't just about an actor strike or a writer strike. There's a lot more involved with all of this. So yeah, it's fascinating. And I love hearing their stories because I don't know that I could be that passionate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do we have coming up? Anything of interest on your end?
Here's the other thing. This is another kind of spin-off of all of that is movies based on people's lives. And I think next week we're going to look at films that were based on. You saw The Blind Side where Michael Ora's saying, that wasn't true. They used me. How true are these based in truth films? and how really can we trust them? And I did get a chance to talk to the real guy behind Gran Turismo, and you'll get a chance to meet Jann and find out his story. But next week we're going to look at that whole world of this is based on a true story, or parts of this are based on a true story, or some of this could be true, But I think we'll look at that. So think of the films that you've seen, and you go, you know what? I don't know how close that is.
It's an interesting one, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about this one next week, but I started watching the second season of Winning Time on HBO, the one that follows the rise of the LA Lakers, right? We talked a little bit about this a few episodes ago, but how there were some criticisms of it perhaps not necessarily being as truthful to reality. And the first episode comes on and they put up a disclaimer saying that some of the things here in the show may have been changed for dramatic purposes. Some characters might have been fudged a little bit. So yeah, I kind of found that one interesting.
It's amazing how they use those lines to, get them off the hook, but also how they reword that all the time, based on a true story, based in fact. This is a factualized version of true events. I mean, where do they come up with this crap to identify it? But I think it'll be fun. And we talked to Jann, and he tells you what it's like and how he thought the movie went.
Awesome. All right. Well, that sounds good. And it gives us something to look forward to next week. I know you sent me the interview already. You had that one kind of squirreled away from me. And it's in the bag. And I gave it a little bit of a sneak preview. I'll give it a final listen between now and when we speak again. But until next week, thank you all for listening to this episode of Streamed and Screened.
Remember your passion.